Hello and welcome to The Conversation here on News Central Television. This is a show where we bring you regular updates of political happenings and in-depth analysis on the political happenings in the continent. I'm Benga Aborowa.
And I am Rita Omodia.
And it's time for The Conversation. Quite a lot from the headlines.
Definitely. African headlines still had Mali on the headline. Fort Burno, we know protests that they said were going to occur on Friday due to the economic sanctions placed by ECOWAS. And we saw thousands of people rally around against ECOWAS.
It was a mammal crowd, and they were clearly sending a message that please, Malians would handle Malian problems, and France should stay out of
it. And talking about protests, Sudan is still having protests. They had a protest today, and despite the large amount of people that came out, we saw police forces fire tear gas at protesters demanding for democracy.
Yeah, it's almost ongoing, and it's one of the issues we'll be looking at today on The Conversation. But today on The Conversation, we're turning our attention to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the Vice President of Congo's Parliament, Jean-marc Kabund, resigned on Friday over what he described as bullying, humiliation and torture. Kabund is the top ally of President Felix Tshisekedi. His resignation came 2 days after members of the president's guard force allegedly razed his Kinshasa home on Wednesday and arrested a man believed to be a guard.
Now, observers say Kabund's resignation is a sign of growing cracks in Tshisekedi's ruling Sacred Union coalition ahead of the 2023 presidential election. At the end of 2020, Tshisekedi ended an alliance with his predecessor, Joseph Kabila, and removed several of his allies from key posts.
Joining us to discuss this and more is Jody Umbalo. He's a political analyst and expert in counter-terrorism. He joins us live from Melbourne, Australia. Thanks for joining us on the show, Jody.
Thank you. Thanks for welcome. Thanks for having me on the show.
So Jody, looking at the resignation from Jean-marc Kabund, did it come as a surprise to you?
Well, this was not quite a surprise because there was already tensions between the two leaders before the election, when Jean-marc Kabund was given the position as the acting president of the UDPS, there was tensions between the fact that Felix was the son of the former UDPS leader, and Jean-marc Kabund was the Secretary General. And when Tshisekedi went and supported Martin Fayulu for being the candidate of the opposition, Jean-marc Kabund was the one that decided to tell Felix to pull out from the Lamuka coalition before the election. And then since then, when Felix withdrew his signature and became himself the candidate, Jean-marc Kabund believed that he was the one that made Felix the president today. And then from that point, there was always been tension between Felix after he was elected president and Kabund as the vice president of the parliament. And that tension kept growing over time until what happened last week.
Now, talking about what happened last week, CCTV footage shared by Kabund's family showed half a dozen men in army fatigues entering the garden of his home. In the evening, on Wednesday evening, they removed one man from the property, kicking and hitting him as they left. Do you think it was this particular incident that led to his resignation, or there's been underlying issues?
There was underlying issues. And then that was just the incident that blew up the everything. Prior to this situation, on both ends, there was multiple provocation, I would say. Jean-marc Kabund, as the vice president of parliament, has been antagonizing the family of Felix Tshisekedi in some ways. Like, for example, he was acting as the one to enforce road rules, for example, in Kinshasa, and then he once um, blew up tires of Tshisekedi's mother's car, and that was the first incident the first major incident between the two. And then just before his house was ransacked, he stopped Felix Tshisekedi's member of family, brother or sister, I'm not too sure exactly, and took one of the guards that is attached to the presidential family and took them to jail. And then as a result, the presidential advisor or the entourage of Felix sent the unit that secured the presidential family and infrastructure to ransack Jean-marc Kabund's house. Mm-hmm. So that was where things escalated and got to his resignation.
Okay, let's look at the impact of this resignation. We know that Jean-marc Kabund was a very strategic player and, of course, he played a very strong role, in particular, in the management of the Sacred Union, the coalition of Felix Tshisekedi. So what do you think will be the impact of his resignation?
Well, the impact will be really, really dramatic. At this point, what could be the consequences are that the weakening even further of the coalition, the Union Sacrée that Felix created in parliament, and then even further would be the UDPS party itself will be weakened because Jean-marc Kabund, he's perceived as the strongman of UDPS, the mobilizer, the one that mobilizes the base. The base is the people that support Felix in Kinshasa, largely. And also, he was perceived as the one that maintained cohesion in parliament. So at the moment, Felix will have to find someone that could to fit in those shoes in parliament to enforce the Union Sacrées, especially that we are heading to elections next year.
Now, talking about elections in 2023, December, it's a big deal. Does this resignation and this skirmish between Kabund and Tshisekedi have a chance of affecting Tshisekedi's re-elections? And do you think Kabund might in any way decamp and join the opposition of Martin Fayulu or Moise Katumbi?
Just to answer the first question, the election for Felix is already really, really hard because at the moment he hasn't delivered his promises, and he's facing a lot of issues, especially after his trip to his native province of Kasai, where his electoral base is located. He faced a lot of criticism from his base. And then talking about Kabund's prospects, I doubt that he joins the opposition of Martin Fayulu or Moise Katumbi because I believe, this is my own opinion, I believe that Kabund has believes in himself strongly because he made Tshisekedi president today. So he believes it's his own ability to create a current within UDPS, which will divide Felix's base. And also,
yes.
Yep.
I was going to say, is the opposition not going to exploit these cracks within the UDPS? Because they say a house divided can't stand on its own. You have the Kabund camp, and you also have President Felix Tshisekedi's camp. Do you think any of them is going to jump ship, or they would fight for the ticket of UPDS?
Well, that's is what we are yet to see, how the opposition will react from this division. But I know that this division within the UTPS is it's a positive thing for the opposition. However, we don't know whether Kabund will decide to join them or whether Martin Fayulu or Moise Katumbi will let him join their coalitions. And also, not to mention that so far, Moise Katumbi is still part of the Union Sacrée with Felix Tshisekedi.
As things stand.
And yeah, and also this definitely benefits the opposition at the moment, and they will exploit that.
Oh, well, we are waiting for how that will play out, because we also know that even within the camp, apart from Kabund, we still have disintegration within Felix Tshisekedi's camp. But now, still talking 2023 elections, we know that DR Congo was able to achieve its first peaceful democratic transfer of power since independence from Belgium in 1960. But it didn't come without challenges. Now, the elections in 2018 were postponed a few times before they finally happened. Are you confident with all that has happened within Felix Tshisekedi's camp that the elections will hold in December 2023?
Well, I doubt that. Just the fact that at the moment, the parliament hasn't passed legislations that will make the 2023 elections possible. Because there is a need to reform the electoral. There's a need to make new electoral reforms that the parliament hasn't been able to pass, and also the election is costly, and then the government hasn't have enough money at the moment for the election in 2023. And what I believe is that Felix, in his position at the moment, he's not ready to go into the election. So he will probably looking into another dialogue with the opposition, so they would agree on postponing the election for a year, unless the money is made available this year and earlier next year.
But recently, in an interview he granted to, I believe, French television, the question was thrown at him, and he responded angrily and said, it would be stupid of him not to hold elections as at when due. That's December 2023. It's still more than a year away from now. So I believe there's enough time, and others would think he might want to buy time like his predecessor.
Well, at this point, with the way the parliament is dragging the feet, it's beneficial for the government and Felix himself. Once the electoral reforms are passed on, then we can see that the government is now pressing to go to the elections. But at the moment, we are not seeing that.
Okay, so now the defeated Congolite bill in the Democratic Republic of Congo sought to exclude from higher office those not born to Congolese parents. Could this intensify ethnic tensions ahead of the 2023 presidential election?
Oh, definitely. That will intensify crisis, and also it will delegitimize the election. And this move that the party in power tried to play last year, at this point, I doubt that they will use that card again, because it's well known that this is targeting one individual, Moise Katumbi, and is the one of the biggest rival to Felix's re-election.
Yeah, and it's quite. I mean, it's a victory for Congolese democracy that Congolese bill was shot down in Parliament. Now, thousands of Congolese took to the streets of Kinshasa last year to demand a neutral poll body after President Felix Tshisekedi installed a close friend to head the commission, the Congolese Independent Electoral Commission. Do you think this jeopardizes the integrity of the polls, or is it just the opposition making a mountain out of a molehill with this appointment?
Well, there's a large majority of the Congolese people and the opposition that do not trust the election and the electoral commissions at the moment, just the fact that the one that was chosen as the president to lead the electoral commission is known to be Felix Tshisekedi and the UDPS close relations, and also the way the leadership of the electoral commission was set up. I believe that they would have been more transparent in the way that body was chosen, rather than continuing these sort of like forcing, because these are the legacy of Kabila's regime by using strategies to undermine the elections, and also making the process less trustworthy for the opposition and for the majority of the Congolese people.
But do you see protests continuing if there's a delayed elections come December 2023?
Absolutely, absolutely. There will be protests, and then as we approach to 2023, what we know as the Union Sacrée would disintegrate, because at the moment this majority only holds because of the majority of people in parliament are looking into the next election by trying to mobilize fundings. But as we approach, this cohesion that we see today will slowly disintegrate, and also it will create more tensions if the election is not clearly planned. And as we, it's believed that we could go to another dialogue, but the government has to show that they are willing to hold the elections next year. But if not, there'll be more and more tension and mass protests on the streets.
Okay, Jordi, as Congolese living in diaspora, and you do understand the history of your country, before the last elections in 2018, it was 60 years before the last peaceful transfer of power. Now we've seen the Kabila dynasty has moved away from power. Politically, would you say Congo has advanced from where it was in 2018 to where it is today? I do know that you have their unique challenges, like all countries do have.
Yeah, I strongly believe that at this point, Congo had made a step further. However, that step ahead has been undermined by the way the election was conducted in 2018. Nevertheless, we have moved to from having leaders that are non-elected or leaders that are former military. And then this is, if the next election in 2023 is more transparent, and then the results is transparent, I think we will definitely say that we have moved from the legacy of the countries that never had peaceful election and transitions.
Okay, still looking at matters in Congo. Now, you talked about predictions of probably Tshisekedi's stolen December 2023 elections and protests continuing. But as a way forward, how do we curb delay in elections? Do we have, just like how we have in Mali and Sudan and Guinea, do we have the ECOWAS coming in to interfere and making sure that people who are placed in a democratic position do not stall elections and allow for peaceful transitions of elections?
Well, I believe that the Congolese people are quite capable of, holding accountable the government to put enough pressure to the government so they could organize transparent elections. And then, like the people did with Kabila when he delayed the election, there was a lot of pressure from within and from outside to push Kabila even to failing to put a person that was his allied, like the other candidate, Ramazani Shadari. And I think today there's more and more awareness within the Congolese people to demand more transparent elections and make the government more accountable.
Thank you very much, Jordi Imbalo. This is where we'll draw the curtains on this conversation. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us on the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And coming up on the conversation after the break, we will be looking at events in Sudan. Stay with us.
طبعا ما قبل ان ننهي بالمبادره دي اطلاقا. ليه؟ لانه هم اساسا يعني ما قعدوا معانا زي ما سبق تحدثت لك قبل شويه، وما ورونا انه هم في المبادره دي النقاط شنو. بالتالي بتصبح بالنسبه لنا منقوصه هي يعني. لذلك نحن بالنسبه لنا مرفوضه رفضا تاما، ونحن على باغين على مبادئنا اللي حكينا عنها باللاءات الثلاثه، لا تحاور لا تفاوض لا شرعي.
المبادره ما جات في وقتها لانه نحن ما طالبين الشراكه مع العسكر اساسا نهائي، ما طالبين مشاركه مع العسكر. الشراكه مع العسكر هي اللي خلتنا ليه هسه نحن كده. نحن دايرين مدنيه صعبه.
So you just watched reactions of ordinary Sudanese in the streets of Khartoum to what the purported negotiations that will happen between the United Nations and opposition groups. So following the resignation of Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok, the United Nations called for talks with various factions involved with the aim of helping Sudan resolve its escalating political crisis.
While a pro-democratic group known as the Central Council for the Forces of Freedom and Change agreed to UN broker talks, other pro-democratic groups in the country have rejected the offer of the UN. Joining us live now is Sudanese political analyst, Dr. Majulin El-Haj El-Tahi. It's so good to have you join us on the conversation.
Thank you.
Dr. El-Tahir, given the call for talks by the United Nations with the aim of resolving this protracted political crisis in Sudan, there's just been one response from the CCFFC pro-democratic group. Is there cracks in the ranks of the opposition groups? Why are other prominent opposition democratic groups not responsive?
In fact, they all have responded, and more or less, they have responded with the same kind of message. Perhaps it is a message from the Freedom and Forces changes that went more viral and known. However, the resistance committees, they have, in the different towns and cities, they have responded to the call by the United Nations. The Sudanese Professionals Association have responded. The Sudanese Communist Party have responded. The Freedom and Forces changes have also responded. All these four factions represent the pro-democracy groups, political groups in the Sudan. They have all responded, and they have all come with a basic. The differences are minute, I would say.
Okay.
And the message is that any negotiation, there are no negotiation, no power sharing. It is one thing and only one thing, and that is a handover of power by the military to the civilians. That's the only way forward. And what happened is that the differences, like I said, between the three are quite minute. But all these three groups have sat down with Mr. Volker, the representative of the United Nations in the Sudan, and have expressed these views to him very clearly. Well, what happens is that the international community, vis-a-vis the United Nations, have the Troika, the African Union, and what the so-called Friends of Sudan, which includes several countries, and specifically Arab state countries. They have been pushing very hard since the coup d'etat on the 25th of October. They are the ones who pushed former Prime Minister Hamdok into making a deal with Burhan, a deal that was immediately rejected by pro-democracy forces in the street. The second one is that the resignation of the Prime Minister Hamdok has not deterred the demonstrators from taking to the streets to express their wishes and demands for an all-civilian handover by the military. The third one came at the beginning of January, and that is the initiative by the United Nations vis-a-vis Mr. Volker for negotiations. Unfortunately, the reason why it was rejected, and with some political parties rejected outright and some with reservation, because in his invitation, he was talking about sitting with the military. I mean, there is no sitting. As I am speaking to you just right now, about 3 minutes from coming live on this TV program, I have been checking my WhatsApp for information. There are 3 peaceful demonstrators who were killed just in the last hour.
While negotiations are going on.
And the numbers will rise, making it about 68, because last was 64. That was up until last night. Okay, and if you add 3, that makes it 67. But that 3 is just a confirmed one. And as we go along through the night, that number will increase.
Okay.
You cannot talk about sitting down to talks with someone. Tomorrow there is a summit by the friends in Sudan in the capital Riyadh of Saudi Arabia. Well, I mean, that is just starting at the wrong end of the stick. You cannot start holding talks in a capital whereby it is part of the problem. I mean, what kind of a solution could the leaders of Saudi Arabia, the leaders of Egypt, the leaders of the United Arab Emirates could have to offer the Sudan?
So in other words, Dr. El Tahi, are you saying that the negotiations with the UN will not be fruitful?
No, it won't be. And the reason why it won't be, because like I said, when the invitation was made, it was made making the victims and the perpetrators, the killers, on equal, it was called equally. And another one is that it was unconditional. It wasn't that the military was given a place, seat on the table of negotiations, on the premises, on the conditions that the killing should stop, or that they should release detainees or something. No, it was carte de blanche. It was given to the military completely without any conditions attached to it. It was given in a way that we are equal partners. We are not equal partners. We're talking about the whole country versus a very few in the military holding guns to the faces and to the chests of civilian demonstrators, non-violent demonstrators. And I have to emphasize and re-emphasize the peacefulness, the level of organization and the coordination of the protests in the Sudan. They are not, they are, and I would say that unprecedented, because it had been 3 years of a consistent message, consistently sticking to non-violence. The numbers of peaceful demonstrators are killed is a scandal to the international community. It really is a scandal in the face of the international community that these youth, these young men and women, have been out in the streets for 3 years, adamant and determined.
And the response by the Sudanese authority, like you rightly said, has been disproportionate. Now, let's talk about finding a solution. You have the United Nations brokered peace led by Volker Perthes on one side, and you also have the Friends of Sudan, who are not exactly democratic. These are autocratic petro-monarchies. You have Saudi Arabia, you have Egypt, you also have the United Arab Emirates. So we have a schism here. The West is pulling on one side, and the Friends of Sudan in the Middle East are perpetrating the Burhan government in power. So where does the will of the ordinary Sudanese come into play?
What happened was that this support for former President Bashir was there. We were always told by the international community and by our Arab neighbors is that for the stability and security of the Sudan, we need to keep Bashir. Bashir was given a lot of support. That support would swing between, according to Arab, along the lines of Arab contradictions of interest. Like, for example, at some periods, he would be supported by the Qataris and Turks. On other times, it would be supported by the Egyptians and Emiratis and Saudis, etc. However, the whole message was that the Sudan will collapse, and it will collapse and end up in a civil war situation if we don't hold Bashir, because Bashir is holding the country in one piece. That didn't happen. What happened is that under Bashir, we did lose more than half of the country with the declaration of independence of South Sudan. We did almost lose Darfur, and the atrocities in Darfur are well documented and known. And the life in Khartoum became impossible. So people did protest despite the support that he had and from the international community that he had. We did manage through peaceful demonstrations to fall Bashir. And therefore we have in our memory, a very short memory of last 2 years ago, that we did fall Bashir. Now Bashir was actually a lot stronger in his position than the current Burhan. Burhan started off on the brutal end. He started off with absolutely no public, no popularity among the people whatsoever. And in the few weeks that he has been in power, since the 25th of October, he certainly managed to distance himself from any remotely resembling popular support for him. He just became the number one enemy of the nation. And accordingly, he himself poses at the moment a dilemma for his supporters. The supporters who are under this umbrella called the Friends of Sudan, they don't know what to do. They facilitated the coup d'etat. They wanted to push that coup d'etat down the throats of the Sudanese people, down the wishes of the Sudanese people for independence from all this intermingled Arab interests in our country. They failed to do that because the streets are extremely well organized and clear about their message. The people in the Sudan are so clear about their message. It makes the rest of the world feel uncomfortable and unsure about what they are, and it comes with a great deal of shame. And I would say that especially for some countries which claim that they support human rights and democracy and peaceful transition and so on. The United States have appointed a new envoy to the Horn of Africa. Well, that new envoy had started off before coming to Sudan by heading to Riyadh to attend the meeting of the Friends of the Sudan. And in those kind of meetings, which we have been through again and again, and in 2019, is that they have one thing. They know the interests of the regional interests are kept and preserved by the military. And therefore, a military element in that recipe for ruling the Sudan has always to be there. They fund that through direct fund, through military fund, through negotiations, diplomatically, and likewise, through all kind of means in order to go around the wishes of the people of the Sudan and to have their interest vested in the Sudan for as long as possible. Well, this nation here have decided that enough is enough, and now it's about time that we take control of our own resources and of our own country, of our own destiny. And that will start by having a civilian rule. Now, if you ask me...
Dr. Eltai, you've talked so much about the willpower of the people, and I'm sure a lot of Africans would like to emulate the willpower of the people. Despite a lot of obstructions, they still come out to demonstrate. But how many people have to die? When will the military give in? Should we have economic sanctions against them? Probably this would move them to listen to the pleas of the people.
I did ask this exact question, and what happened is that, first of all, sanctions against the country, we don't want that at all. That has been tried, and it only impoverishes the people, and it only complicates the life of the people. However, we have asked repeatedly for individual sanctions against these perpetrators. If there is a political will, okay, if there is a political will from powerful countries like the United States, okay, these people, we do not, and absolutely not asking for military intervention under any name. We are capable of doing that on our own, but two things need to be done. Number one, economic sanctions against these military individuals. That is possible. That's quite possible by the EU and by the United States to have that. And the second one is the control of the arming these militia and military groups. And that's, again, is completely possible. I mean, the EU and the United States among themselves and in their intelligence, they know, I don't know, the people in the street don't know where these guys get their tear gas, limitless amount of tear gas and guns and so on, and training. I tell you one small example about the cynicism of this whole thing. The main forces working against the demonstrators and shooting at the demonstrators is called the Rapid Response Forces. Well, the Rapid Response Forces signed last month a deal with the International Red Cross, and I repeat it, and I'm completely responsible for what I'm saying. Yes. And you can check it on the internet. The International Committee for the Red Cross, they signed a deal with them so that they can train their members to something like a form of training for human rights preservation or something. And that will involve a form of training and military training. Now these things need to stop. These kind of things need to stop.
You believe they're encouraging
which I say that embarrasses the conscience of the international community, including not just countries, but even international NGOs like the ICRC.
Now, Dr. Altahir, just before we wrap things up, we've seen this play out for months. Your last count, 60-odd people have died. The protesters are dogged in their resolve not to leave the streets. They're well organized, and I mean, their passion is admired in different parts of the world. But they can't protest in perpetuity. And General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and his junta are not ready to relinquish power. Should there be any, and I know they've tried the power sharing formula in the past with Abdallah Hamdok, it didn't work. Should there be some compromise, at least from the protesters, looking at where Sudan is coming from, 30-odd years of brutal dictatorship under Omar al-Bashir? The military is not going to hand you power just like a piece of cake. Should there be some middle ground, or you support their stand of no power sharing deal, 100% civilian-led government?
Yes, there must be a compromise. We will compromise. We have to compromise. But what we want to compromise on civilians, like, for example, these groups, which I called just now pro-democracy groups, they're not one entity, and they don't have equally all the same interests. And they are not unconnected to what I call regional powers and etc. There are, but we want the compromise to be on the civilian part. If we have an all-civilian government tomorrow, it's not going to be all the problems of the Sudan are going to be resolved tomorrow. No, we want to start somewhere, and that somewhere is to have a civilian-led government and to have democracy. The democracy in Sudan, it will take decades before we have a free and fair elections. But we need to start some elections, even corrupt elections. We need to start them. Even some form of corrupt civilian government. We need to start it. We have, and we are the army. The army leadership is very weak now. They really are weak. Like I said, because they also have lost a lot of legitimacy. There are a lot of defections within the army. Just a couple of days ago, they had to get rid of some senior ranking policeman, precisely because not everyone is on the same page. Even in the military, even in the police forces, not everyone is on the same page. A lot of people, after seeing the insistence of people for 3 years, because you have to remember these military personnel, even at the top, they are also Sudanese people with a sense of nationalism, a sense of dignity, patriotism, that they also do not want to see their country being so impoverished, being so poor, being so fragile. They also want something different. And this, we rely on them, that they will be able to get rid of their leaders, but it will take time. What we are up to is a huge change in the Sudan, because when we get rid of the current leadership of the military and move to civilian, we then have covered two major obstacles in the Sudan. The first obstacle is political Islam in the Sudan, which has held the country down for so long and has created a form of subservient relationship to Arab states, and that is gone. And the second one is the military institution. If we can manage to get rid of these two, then Sudan has come a long way to starting to build itself. And we have no illusion that this process will take a very long time, and it's going to be a very painful. There is a price to be paid, but it is very hard for me to say this. It's very hard, and especially now sitting in the diaspora, that the price we pay now is a lot less than what we are going to pay if we continued. And if we give up now, we will lose even more lives, because this as hard as it is what we have to pay, and it is a calculated. It's a lot less than what we would pay if we continued. One last thing before I leave the program, I really would like to emphasize through your channel that civilian people are being shot at, that medical staff has been harassed repeatedly, and as I am speaking to you now, medical staff has been beaten up. The police and army, they go into hospitals and they hijack and arrest injured people because they haven't died, so they take them under arrest to ensure that they die. This is a daily occurrence in the Sudan. It is such a brutal,
quite a very sad
Has there been any response from international bodies concerning this case? Because I know that Sudanese doctors were also protesting against this incessant disturbance from the military. Has there been any response so far?
No, the military has not been any response so far. All they are trying to do is they're trying to break the unity of the people by making some all kind of silly and stupid claims, like the protesters have killed this senior officer, police officer, a couple of days ago. That is just impossible. The protesters have no access to whatsoever this kind of, because we live in kind of two different worlds. The people live in one world, the military lives in another world. They got rid of someone from their own, obviously because he started to have a different view about the directions of the country. And after so many deaths, some of them, they just don't want to shoot. Some of them, they defect. Some of them...
Yeah, and of course, because of the fear of the International Criminal Court, justice will be served one day. And that's what Sudanese in diaspora like you are fighting for. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, Dr. El Tahir. We do appreciate your contribution, and we hope that this negotiations with all parties and stakeholders involved in having lasting peace and democracy in Sudan becomes fruitful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks. Bye-bye.
We also hope that relevant agencies and organizations listen to the plea of the Sudanese people. You could see how passionate she was, talking about people who have died.
It's been one death too many. And she mentioned something quite poignant. How do you have negotiations and at the same time they're still killing protesters? Just today, 3 protesters were shot dead in Sudan. So we'll definitely be monitoring that situation in Sudan, and also all those places of interest in Africa politically. I believe on Wednesday we'll be looking at the situation in Mali, and we'll keep you posted.
And that's where we'll draw the curtains in today's edition of The Conversation. To join us again on Wednesday, 5 p.m. West African time, as we discuss more political issues on the continent. I am Rita Omwadia.
And I'm Benga Borough. See you next time on The Conversation.